Listen carefully, because this is the mistake that destroys most men long before rejection ever does. A man sees a woman he desires, and immediately, his mind enters a state of pursuit. He begins strategizing how to impress her, how to gain her approval, how to make himself appear worthy in her eyes. He texts too quickly, replies too emotionally, watches her every movement like a servant waiting for orders from a queen. And without realizing it, he commits the oldest psychological mistake in human history. He places her above himself. The moment a man begins chasing blindly, he silently announces something dangerous. Your attention is more valuable than my dignity. And women can sense this immediately, not through magic, not through mind reading, through behavior. Niccolò Machiavelli understood that human beings rarely value what submits too easily. In politics, the ruler who begs for loyalty loses authority. In war, the commander who acts desperate invites attack. And in attraction, the man who overpursues slowly destroys the very mystery that created attraction in the first place. Modern society trains men to believe chasing is romantic. Movies glorify obsession. Songs glorify emotional suffering. Social media glorifies desperation disguised as loyalty. A man is taught that if he keeps proving himself, eventually he will win affection like a reward at the end of a race. So he begins sacrificing pieces of himself in exchange for temporary attention. He cancels his priorities to respond instantly. He tolerates disrespect because he fears losing access to her. He studies her moods like a prisoner studies the habits of a guard. And the more he chases, the less she respects him, because attraction is deeply connected to perceived value, and value collapses when something becomes overly available. Look at how human beings behave in every area of life. Rare things create fascination. Scarcity creates desire. Things that are difficult to obtain appear important. But things given freely, excessively, and without restraint quickly become invisible. This is why the desperate man always loses power. Not because he lacks emotion, but because he lacks control. And Machiavelli believed control was the foundation of influence. A woman may enjoy attention from a desperate man. She may even use it for validation. But deep inside, she studies his emotional discipline. She watches whether he can govern himself, whether he has a mission beyond her existence, whether he remains calm when ignored, whether he can walk away from disrespect without collapsing emotionally. Because women are not only attracted to affection, they are attracted to strength, and strength is impossible without self-control. The chasing man becomes predictable. Every action revolves around reaction. If she pulls away, he panics. If she delays a message, he overthinks. If another man appears, he competes desperately for approval. His emotional state becomes controlled by her behavior. He no longer leads himself. And once a man loses leadership over his own emotions, he unconsciously becomes subordinate. That is why Machiavelli warned rulers never to surrender psychological authority to external forces. The man who depends entirely on another person's validation becomes easy to manipulate. Fear controls him. Anxiety controls him. Hope controls him. He starts performing instead of existing naturally. You can see this everywhere. Men pretending to agree with everything a woman says because they fear disagreement will push her away. Men apologizing for boundaries. Men becoming entertainers instead of grounded individuals. Men abandoning purpose, ambition, and discipline the moment attraction enters their life. And ironically, the more they try to secure affection, the faster attraction disappears. Because no woman dreams of following a man who cannot even command himself. The hunter mindset is different. The hunter does not chase recklessly through the forest, making noise and exposing desperation. The hunter understands patience, observation, timing, silence. He does not throw away his energy carelessly because he understands that attention itself is power. This is what modern men fail to understand. Attention is currency. Where your attention goes, your power follows. If a man spends every waking hour obsessing over one woman, checking her status, waiting for replies, analyzing conversations, he slowly drains himself psychologically. His world becomes smaller. His purpose becomes weaker. His identity begins orbiting around her approval, and women instinctively feel this imbalance. But the man who remains focused on his mission creates a completely different psychological effect. He is difficult to control because his happiness does not depend on constant validation. He enjoys connection without becoming enslaved by it. He values women without worshipping them. That distinction changes everything, because worship destroys polarity. The desperate man says yes to everything because he fears loss. The disciplined man accepts loss as part of life, and that acceptance gives him freedom. Ironically, the man most capable of walking away often becomes the man people chase hardest, not because he manipulates others, but because independence is rare. Most people are starving emotionally. They seek external approval constantly. So when someone appears grounded, calm, and emotionally centered, they radiate quiet authority. They appear powerful without needing to announce it. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. People admire what seems unconquerable. The chasing man appears conquered already, and women notice subtle things men ignore. They notice when a man becomes too available too quickly. They notice when he rearranges his entire life around them after minimal investment. They notice when his emotional stability rises and falls based on their attention. These behaviors communicate weakness far louder than words ever could. Because attraction is less about what a man says and more about what his behavior reveals unconsciously. A desperate man can speak confidently while acting anxiously. A disciplined man can remain silent while radiating certainty. And certainty is magnetic. This is why the most powerful men throughout history were rarely the loudest. Kings, generals, strategists, and leaders understood the power of emotional restraint. They did not reveal every thought instantly. They did not beg for approval. They did not collapse under emotional pressure. They maintained mystery, because mystery creates psychological gravity. But the chasing man reveals everything immediately. His intentions, fears, insecurities, and emotional dependency become visible within days. Nothing remains hidden. Nothing remains intriguing. He over-explains himself because he fears misunderstanding. He overgives because he fears replacement. He overchases because he fears abandonment, and fear always leaks through behavior. Women may not consciously explain it this way, but they feel it instinctively. Fear repels. Neediness suffocates. Desperation weakens attraction. This does not mean becoming cold or emotionless. Machiavelli never respected emotional chaos, but he also never respected foolish vulnerability without strategy. The goal is not to hate women. The goal is to understand human nature deeply enough to stop humiliating yourself in pursuit of validation. Because the man who constantly chases eventually forgets who he was before the pursuit began. He loses standards. He loses discipline. He loses peace. And the tragedy is that he believes he is fighting for love, while in reality he is surrendering his power piece by piece without ever noticing the transaction taking place in front of him. There is a reason people obsess over what they cannot fully possess. A reason kings fought wars for rare treasures. A reason empires crossed oceans searching for limited resources. A reason human beings become addicted to attention that feels uncertain. Scarcity creates psychological value, and Niccolò Machiavelli understood this law long before modern psychology gave it a name. The problem is that most men destroy their own value. because they fear silence more than rejection. The moment they feel attraction toward a woman, they begin overexposing themselves emotionally. They become permanently available. Every thought is shared instantly. Every emotion is displayed without restraint. Every moment of distance becomes an emergency they rush to fix. And without realizing it, they erase the one thing that fuels fascination, mystery. The human mind is naturally drawn toward uncertainty. What is partially hidden becomes more intriguing than what is completely revealed. This is why people replay mixed signals in their minds for weeks, while forgetting predictable attention within hours. It is why absence can intensify emotions stronger than constant presence. It is why the man who controls access to himself often becomes unforgettable. But modern men are taught the opposite. They are told that love means endless availability, that proving devotion requires constant access, that if a woman pulls away, they must chase harder, text longer, explain more, and reveal deeper emotions immediately. This creates a deadly imbalance, because once a man becomes emotionally predictable, the tension disappears. And tension is the invisible force that sustains attraction. Machiavelli observed this principle in politics and power. A ruler who gives everything away loses authority because people stop fearing loss. Once people believe access is guaranteed, appreciation fades. The same principle exists inside attraction. When a woman becomes certain that a man will always remain available regardless of her behavior, his psychological value declines. Not because he is kind, not because he is loyal, but because he removed all scarcity from his presence. The modern man fears distance because he interprets it emotionally. The hunter understands distance strategically. He understands that constant exposure weakens impact. Even the sun disappears each night. Even kings retreat from the public eye. Power is strengthened through controlled absence. This is why emotionally disciplined men create deeper fascination. They are not constantly demanding attention. They are not flooding conversations endlessly. They are not reacting impulsively to every emotional impulse. They leave space, and space forces imagination to work. Understand this carefully. Imagination is more powerful than reality in the early stages of attraction. The mind fills silence with fantasy. It assigns value to what feels difficult to fully understand. This is why mystery becomes intoxicating. But desperate men kill mystery immediately. On the first day, they reveal their entire emotional history. On the second day, they begin seeking reassurance. On the third day, their happiness already depends on her responses. Nothing remains undiscovered. And once everything becomes predictable, emotional excitement begins to fade. Women often say they want honesty and openness immediately, but human psychology responds more deeply to emotional tension than logical statements. What people claim they want and what emotionally stimulates them are often completely different things. Machiavelli understood this contradiction well. Human beings are not governed purely by reason. They are governed by perception, emotion, anticipation, and desire. The man who reveals himself slowly creates anticipation. Every interaction carries uncertainty. Every conversation leaves room for curiosity. His life appears full beyond the woman he desires, which signals independence and emotional stability. This is what makes scarcity powerful. Scarcity communicates value without words. When a man is constantly online, constantly replying, constantly available, he unconsciously communicates that nothing significant competes for his attention. But when a man has purpose, discipline, and restraint, his attention becomes selective, and selective attention feels valuable because it is earned rather than freely distributed. Women notice this instantly. They notice when a man's life revolves entirely around them. and they notice when a man remains centered in his own world. The second man creates emotional gravity, because people are naturally attracted to those who seem emotionally complete without needing constant external validation. This does not mean ignoring women intentionally or playing childish manipulation games. Weak men misunderstand scarcity and turn it into toxic behavior. They disappear randomly, act cold unnecessarily, or create artificial distance hoping to trigger insecurity. That is not power. That is insecurity wearing a mask. True scarcity comes naturally from having a meaningful life. A disciplined man is not constantly available because he is genuinely focused on purpose. His mission matters. His time matters. His peace matters. A woman enters his world, but she does not become the center of it instantly. And paradoxically, this increases attraction, because obsession repels while grounded confidence attracts. The desperate man treats every interaction like a final opportunity. The hunter treats interaction calmly because he understands abundance. He knows his identity does not collapse if one woman loses interest. He knows his value is not dependent on external approval. That mindset changes everything. People can feel when someone fears losing them, and they can feel when someone appreciates them without becoming dependent. Dependence creates pressure. Scarcity creates intrigue. This is why the most desired individuals are often the least emotionally needy. They are capable of connection, but they do not suffocate others with emotional hunger. They maintain standards. They protect their time. They remain emotionally balanced whether attention increases or disappears. And this emotional balance becomes magnetic because it feels rare in a world addicted to instant validation. Social media destroyed patience. Now everyone expects immediate responses, constant entertainment, and endless emotional reassurance. People panic when messages remain unanswered for an hour. They measure self-worth through digital attention. They expose every thought online because silence feels uncomfortable, but silence is power. Machiavelli knew silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty creates psychological tension. The person who speaks less often appears more powerful because others project meaning onto their restraint. Meanwhile, the person who constantly explains himself appears anxious for approval. Women observe this dynamic closely. The man who reacts emotionally to every small change becomes easy to predict, easy to control, easy to replace emotionally. But the man who remains composed creates a completely different emotional experience. His calmness suggests internal strength. His restraint suggests confidence. His absence creates curiosity rather than relief, and curiosity is the beginning of obsession. This is why some men confuse women endlessly without understanding why. One man offers unlimited attention and receives indifference. Another man remains focused on his own life and suddenly becomes unforgettable. The difference is rarely appearance alone. It is psychological value. Scarcity transforms perception. Even in conversation, the hunter understands this principle. He does not talk endlessly trying to impress. He allows pauses. He allows tension. He allows moments where the woman wonders what he is thinking instead of receiving constant emotional explanations. Because the mind becomes attached to unfinished emotional experiences. This is also why walking away from disrespect increases value. The desperate man tolerates everything because he fears abandonment. The disciplined man accepts loss rather than sacrificing dignity. That willingness to leave communicates enormous psychological strength, and strength creates respect before it creates attraction. Machiavelli believed people test boundaries constantly. If a man abandons all standards to maintain access to a woman, she unconsciously learns that his principles are negotiable. But when a man protects his self-respect calmly and without emotional chaos, he appears stable and difficult to manipulate. Scarcity is not about disappearing from the world. It is about becoming selective with your energy, your emotions, your time, and your attention. Because whatever is endlessly available, eventually, becomes invisible. And the man who gives away his entire identity too quickly often wakes up one day wondering why the woman he chased so desperately suddenly lost interest in the version of him that no longer felt rare, mysterious, or difficult to replace. Most men believe attraction is built through explanation. They think if they say the right things, use the right compliments, send the right paragraphs, and prove their intentions clearly enough, they can secure loyalty, admiration, and desire. But Niccolò Machiavelli understood a brutal truth about human nature centuries ago. People rarely believe words. They believe behavior, and nowhere is this more visible than in attraction. A woman can listen to a man speak confidently for hours, but a real judgment happens beneath the surface. She watches how he reacts under pressure, how he handles disrespect, how he responds to uncertainty, whether he becomes emotional when challenged, whether his mood collapses when attention disappears. Because words are cheap, behavior reveals power. This is why so many men fail despite saying everything correctly. They memorize confidence, but their actions leak insecurity. They speak about standards but tolerate poor treatment. They claim emotional strength, yet panic the moment a woman becomes distant, and women notice these contradictions immediately, not because women possess supernatural intuition, but because human beings instinctively study emotional consistency. Machiavelli observed this in rulers and leaders. A prince could make grand speeches about authority, but if fear appeared in his actions, people stopped respecting him. A king who constantly reassured others of his strength usually lacked it. Real power rarely announces itself loudly because true authority does not depend on convincing everyone constantly. The same principle exists in relationships. Weak men attempt to negotiate attraction through words. Strong men communicate value through emotional stability. Watch how desperate men behave around women they desire. The moment tension appears, they rush to fix it. The moment distance appears, they chase reassurance. The moment another man enters the picture, jealousy consumes them. They begin over-explaining themselves emotionally because they fear misunderstanding and rejection. They send long messages trying to prove loyalty, honesty, and good intentions, but hidden underneath those words is fear. Fear of losing her, fear of replacement, fear of not being enough, and fear always weakens presence. Women test for this constantly, often unconsciously. Sometimes the tests are small, delayed responses. Disagreement, emotional unpredictability, changes in attention, moments of withdrawal. These situations are not always planned manipulations. Often they are instinctive observations designed to measure a man's emotional center. Can he remain calm without becoming cold? Can he maintain standards without becoming emotional? Can he disagree without losing composure? Can he handle uncertainty without collapsing psychologically? These questions matter more than compliments ever will, because attraction is deeply tied to emotional safety and strength. A woman wants to feel that a man can handle pressure without becoming unstable. Not just physical pressure, but emotional pressure, social pressure, psychological pressure. And most men fail these tests because they misunderstand attraction completely. They think women fall for effort alone, so they overinvest immediately. They try to earn affection through endless availability and emotional transparency. But when challenges arise, their emotional reactions reveal weakness beneath the performance. This is why Machiavelli valued emotional discipline above emotional expression. He understood that self-control creates authority. A man who cannot govern his own emotions becomes controlled by external events. And women can feel when a man lacks internal control. Imagine two men facing the same situation. A woman suddenly becomes distant. The first man panics internally. He sends multiple messages asking what happened. He overthinks every interaction. His mood changes completely. He seeks reassurance desperately because uncertainty terrifies him. The second man notices the distance calmly. He does not ignore reality, but he also does not abandon himself emotionally. He remains centered, focused, stable. If clarification is needed, he communicates directly without emotional chaos. If disrespect appears, he walks away with dignity rather than begging for validation. Which man appears stronger? Which man appears capable of leadership? Which man creates emotional security instead of emotional pressure? Women observe these moments carefully because difficult situations reveal authentic character. Anyone can appear confident when everything feels easy. True emotional power appears when uncertainty enters the room. This is why some men lose attraction the moment they become emotionally reactive. Their reactions expose dependency, and dependency shifts the balance of power instantly. Machiavelli believed dependence was dangerous because whoever controls your emotional state controls your behavior. The man who becomes psychologically dependent on a woman's attention slowly loses freedom. He begins adapting himself constantly to avoid losing access to her. He stops speaking honestly, stops setting boundaries, stops acting naturally. Instead, he performs. And performance eventually becomes exhausting. Women sense when a man is performing confidence instead of embodying it genuinely. Real confidence does not need constant reinforcement. It remains stable whether attention increases or disappears. That stability creates respect. And respect sustains attraction longer than excitement ever can. Modern culture tells men to express everything, but uncontrolled emotional expression without discipline often creates instability instead of connection. Machiavelli would never advise suppressing all emotion completely, but he would warn against emotional exposure without strategic awareness. Because once a woman realizes your emotions are entirely controlled by her behavior, the dynamic changes forever. You become predictable. Predictability weakens tension, weakens mystery, weakens authority. This is why emotionally disciplined men often appear more attractive even when they speak less. Their calmness creates intrigue, their restraint creates security, their reactions feel measured instead of impulsive. The desperate man reacts immediately to everything. The disciplined man chooses his response carefully. That difference changes perception completely. Women are highly sensitive to emotional energy. They notice when a man becomes overly eager for approval. They notice when his confidence disappears after one disagreement. They notice when his emotional stability depends on constant reassurance. Because behavior exposes emotional truth more honestly than language ever could. A man can say, "I respect myself." But if he tolerates disrespect repeatedly, his behavior reveals the lie. A man can say, "I am confident," but if he becomes jealous and possessive instantly, his actions reveal insecurity. A man can say, "I don't need validation," but if he collapses emotionally after being ignored, reality becomes visible. And reality is what women trust. This is why silence can sometimes communicate more powerfully than explanation. The man who constantly defends himself often appears uncertain. The man who remains composed under misunderstanding appears grounded. Machiavelli understood that perception shapes influence. People follow those who appear emotionally stable, because stability creates trust. Emotional chaos creates doubt, and attraction cannot survive inside constant emotional instability. Many men believe women want complete emotional transparency at all times, but what women truly seek is emotional maturity. The ability to feel deeply without becoming controlled by every feeling. the ability to remain calm during tension instead of becoming reactive. Because emotional reactions reveal whether a man is led by impulse or by discipline, and discipline has always been attractive. Kings needed it, warriors needed it, leaders needed it. A man who cannot master himself cannot lead anything, not a relationship, not a purpose, not even his own mind. This is why women test power through behavior instead of words. They are searching for emotional certainty beneath surface charm. They are studying whether a man's confidence is real or fragile, whether his strength remains intact when pressure arrives, because pressure destroys performance and exposes truth. And the truth most men hide behind endless words is that they are terrified of losing validation, terrified of abandonment, and terrified of standing alone with themselves in silence once attention disappears.